$60 for a guitar. Is that a joke? Is it junk? Or will it jam? Let's find out in this video. Hey everyone, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you're already subscribed, thanks a lot for your support. Really appreciate that. If this is your first time, my name is Jimmy, and on this channel we do technique lessons, song lessons, and gear videos just like this one. So if you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. So this video is coming about because I was contacted by Glarry, reached out to me and asked if I would review one of their instruments, test it out, give some comments, and make a video about it. So in the name of full disclosure, this guitar was sent to me by them, and I don't have to give it back no matter what I say about it. So that's the story for this review. Now you can find more details on this guitar and their website in the description box below. In this video we're going to go through some of my thoughts and comments about the guitar itself. Before we do the tone test, I'll take you through what was in the box when I received it, some thoughts about the finish and quality of the instrument, and also my take on how it feels to play. If you want to skip around to those different sections of the video, just check the links below for the timestamps. Now, I'm not much on unboxings. I like to save that for when the camera's off. But let me just show you real quick what you get in the box when you receive this guitar. Of course, I got the guitar shipped. In the box also came a 1/4-inch instrument cable, received a black guitar strap, 2 Allen keys, one for the truss rod and one for the bridge saddles to adjust both. Got the trem arm, also received a complimentary pick, and finally there was a gig bag that was also included. So please note, don't expect too much protection from this gig bag. It's probably more bag than gig bag, but it was included and it's better than nothing, so it's okay for the job. And considering that I've spent more money buying individual cases or bags, more money than you would pay for this entire guitar, this bag that's included is perfectly fine. Now let's talk about the feel and quality of the instrument. When I pulled it out, the first thing I noticed was how light it actually is. The website says a basswood body, and while it is light, it's by no means uncomfortable to play. So it feels good playing when you're sitting and also when you're standing, so no issues there, just a little bit of a surprise when I pulled it out. So now working our way from the back and then across the instrument, I ended up with the Sunburst, which I picked out. So it's got the black back. One thing on the one I received, it's got a little nick on the back. Not a big deal, but just good to note that it's there. And then you have the trem cover for the springs and everything in the back. The screw holes are a little bit crooked on this one when I took it off. Not a big deal. It's a little messy back there. One thing that I did notice when I started playing the guitar, there was some crackling going on, so I figured it was the ground wire. And sure enough, when I pulled this off, that ground wire was not connected in the back. Then turning it around, of course, you have the Sunburst. It's a multiple piece body. And then you have your standard bridge and hardware. For a guitar in this price range, it's your regular cheap metal, but not a big deal because, I mean, you figure you can spend as much money for this guitar and more just on a bridge alone. And this one does the job, so it's perfectly fine for what it's doing. Now, I'm not a huge trem user. I'm used to my Telecaster, so I don't mess around with it too much. So I'm not going to comment on the trem or how it feels really. Just know that the one I received, it's got 3 springs in the back, and it sits well, and it holds tune. So I used it a little bit, but I'm not much of a player with it. And then, of course, your pickups and your switching are just what you would expect from a regular Strat. Now, still on the top of the guitar, there are a few finish and quality issues that could be nicer. Specifically with the pickguard, there were some scratches on the pickguard underneath the plastic already, and the edges of the pickguard are a little rough and scruffy, I guess you could say. The other thing I don't really like is there's some nastiness under the area where the fingerboard overlaps the pickguard. So on this neck, after you finish out the frets, the fingerboard comes over past a little bit, and there's some stuff under there that was there. I just, I'll end up pulling that out and cleaning it out a little bit. Now moving on to the neck and the fingerboard, the first thing I noticed is the neck is smooth to play. There's nothing glossy or sticky about it in the finish, and that's a big plus for me. The other interesting thing is that it's got a round feel to it, and it's a little bit wider than I'm used to playing. It's not uncomfortable to play. I could just tell the difference when I pull my thumb over to play certain chords. So it's not a big deal, it's just something to note. One thing I would say, this is just a personal comment about aesthetics. With the sunburst finish, I think it would be cool if the neck itself and the headstock were a little bit darker in color. It's not a big deal, it's just a thought. I figured I'd throw it in there. Now here is the big part. The frets and the fingerboard are really where this guitar shines. I was completely expecting to hate this guitar when it arrived. I figured for $60 it's just going to be absolute garbage. So that's kind of what I had in mind. Of course I had very low expectations for it, but first things first, the way the fingerboard looks is great. There are a few minor scuffs and things that are on there, but they'll clean up just fine. Now the feel of these frets are, I would say, above average for a guitar in this price range. The edges of your fingerboard are nice and smooth. There's no edges of the frets sticking out, no rough pieces. They're rolled over nicely, and they make for a nice, comfortable playing experience. Tops of your frets on this guitar, at least the one I received, were smooth, no scratchy bends, no rough playing there, and I didn't find a single dead fret or any fret leveling issues. The playing, even after I adjusted the action to my taste, has been smooth without any issue. So this was a big surprise for me and a real plus for this guitar. Now, disclaimer, of course, this is my first instrument from Glarry Music, so I would hope that their quality control is of this same level for their other instruments. Of course, if you were to get one, your mileage might vary, so it'd be interesting to know if anybody else has one. How does the fretwork? How does the neck feel? I'd be interested to know, just out of curiosity, because I wouldn't mind trying one of their basses or perhaps another one of their guitars. Next up is the nut. Now, in my opinion, this is where quality control really dropped the ball on this guitar. This is a pretty ugly looking job on the nut. And when I looked at it and when I first pulled it out of the box, I figured that this thing was going to give all kinds of tuning problems. So I tried my best with the tremolo, just driving it all the way down, letting it come back up to see if any of these strings would get stuck. I haven't had any issues with the tuning, and that's actually a surprise to me. So, I mean, it'll be an easy replacement, so it would have been nice to see a better looking job cutting the nut. Now finally, the headstock, like I mentioned before, would be nice to see it a little bit darker. I think that's just a personal preference though. And of course you have your standard run-of-the-mill cheap tuners, but they do the job and they hold tune well. They're just a little loose feeling when you use them. And then finally you have a couple of string trees. Now, as with any guitar that you receive, you have to give it the time for a setup and some adjustments. And in my mind, especially with a guitar in this price range, you have to be fair and at least give it the chance. So I spent a little bit of time doing the action and the intonation, about an hour and a half, doing both of those and also stretching out the strings. And once I did, I was actually surprised at how well it came together, both the feel of the guitar and also the tuning stability. A few of the strings when I was doing the intonation were a little bit sharp. Again, easy adjustment, but once it was done, they seemed to play consistently across the entire fingerboard, which is really nice. And I had no trouble getting the action down to where I personally like to have it. Maybe I like my action a little bit higher than most, but I like to get a grip under some of those strings when I go to bend them. And once I got it done to my taste, you'd be able to get it lower, I feel, if you wanted to. But once I got it done to my taste, it plays smooth all the way up and down the neck. And again, like I mentioned before, no fret leveling issues. and they feel smooth when bending. Now let's check out some tones on this guitar. We'll go through some individual tones and then we'll try the guitar in a mix and see how it sounds. First things first, let's try some open chords. Now let's try a few closed chords played with the fingers. Now let's do a combination of chords and single note lines, again through all pickup positions, and then we'll test the neck pickup tone control, and finally the middle pickup tone control. Finally, let's check out this guitar in a piece of a mix. So in my opinion, the tones do not disappoint. Of course, this is an electric guitar, so you have a lot of flexibility as far as your amp, effects, or even software platforms that you play through, so it's very forgiving in that regard. But it has a lot of potential as well. Let's wrap it up with some concluding thoughts about the overall quality of the instrument and what you can do with it. Now I have to admit, like I mentioned before, I was expecting this guitar to arrive and for it to be complete garbage. So I had very low expectations as far as being able to recommend it to anyone. But I was surprised. I can not only recommend it, but I also enjoy playing it on my own projects, which is kind of cool and, like I said, surprising. But it's not without its imperfections and flaws. Of course, like we mentioned before, cheap hardware to be expected on this kind of a guitar, cheap tuners, the quality control, like I mentioned in the back with that crackling sound when I first played it, that ground wire that was disconnected, not great. If you're a beginner, if this is your first guitar, that would be disappointing if you got those kind of crackling sounds when you first plugged it in. And then finally, of course, that ugly looking nut, easy to replace, but still something that's disappointing on the guitar. At the same time, of course, we do have flaws and imperfections in the instrument, but it has its pluses. And the big one that I found was the feel of the fretboard and the neck. The quality of the fretwork was above average for a guitar in this price range, and it makes it enjoyable to play. It's not a chore, it's not work, and it has a lot of potential, and it's really nice in that regard. And of course, once you set it up properly and get the strings stretched out, it will stay in tune and stay pretty stable. So really, I would say, all things considered, I can recommend this guitar for a beginner. It's a great guitar to start out with, and of course, without those quality issues, it'll be perfectly fine for someone to start learning to play on. And it's great to start learning on an electric guitar. Perfectly fine, and it's very enjoyable to start that way. If you're an experienced player, don't look down on the cheesy name like I did. This guitar can play and feel very nice, and it also is a cheap modding platform with a lot of potential. Again, big thanks to Glarry Music for reaching out and asking me to do this review. It was nice and also enlightening to actually take on this project. It's also going to be interesting to see how this guitar holds up in the future. So maybe there's going to be some mods done to it, or perhaps little adjustments that are made to improve it. So who knows, maybe there's going to be a part 2 to this video. Let's conclude with today's topic as always. What's the cheapest guitar you've ever bought, and how do you feel about it? Let us know in the comment section down below. Let's get the conversation going and see how we can help each other out. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this and hit that bell to get notified, and we'll see you on the next one.